There exists within every human being a mental fortress, a psychological citadel, so impregnable that no external force can breach its walls. This fortress is not built of stone or steel, but of something far more powerful, an invincible mentality. Yet most people walk through life unaware that they possess the blueprints to construct this fortress. They surrender their mental sovereignty to circumstances, to critics, to failures, to fears. They believe that mental strength is a gift bestowed upon the fortunate few, when in truth it is a skill that can be developed, refined, and perfected by anyone willing to commit 30 days to its construction. The tragedy is not that people lack the capacity for mental invincibility, but that they have never been shown the systematic approach to building it. They mistake mental toughness for mere stubbornness, resilience for mere endurance, confidence for mere bravado. But true mental invincibility is something far more sophisticated, far more nuanced, and infinitely more powerful than these crude imitations. It is the ability to maintain complete psychological equilibrium regardless of external circumstances. It is the capacity to transform any setback into a setup for comeback. It is the power to extract strength from every storm, wisdom from every wound, and opportunity from every obstacle. This is not wishful thinking or positive psychology platitudes. This is the science of mental architecture, the engineering of psychological resilience, the systematic construction of an unshakable inner core that becomes your permanent competitive advantage in life. The first foundation stone of this mental fortress is the recognition that your mind is not a passive receiver of experiences, but an active creator of reality.
Every thought you think is a choice. Every belief you hold is a decision. Every emotional response you generate is within your control. The moment you truly grasp this fundamental truth, you begin to reclaim your mental sovereignty. You stop being a victim of your thoughts and become their master. You stop being controlled by your emotions and become their director. This is not about suppressing negative thoughts or pretending difficulties do not exist. It is about developing the mental discipline to choose your response to any situation, regardless of how challenging or unexpected it may be. The untrained mind is like a wild horse, bucking and thrashing at the slightest disturbance. The trained mind is like a thoroughbred racehorse, channeling all its power and energy toward a chosen destination. The difference is not in the inherent capacity, but in the level of training and discipline applied. Your mind right now has all the raw material necessary to become invincible. What it lacks is the systematic training that transforms this raw potential into refined power. The second cornerstone of mental invincibility is the understanding that failure is not the opposite of success, but the raw material from which success is forged. Every setback contains within it the seeds of a greater comeback. Every defeat carries the blueprint for a more decisive victory. Every mistake holds the lesson that prevents 10 future errors. The mentally invincible person does not avoid failure. They mine it for its treasures. They do not fear mistakes. They collect them like precious gems. They understand that the fastest path to expertise is through the territory of error, that the quickest route to mastery runs directly through the landscape of learning from failure.
This perspective is not naturally occurring in the human psyche. It must be cultivated, practiced, and reinforced until it becomes automatic. The typical person experiences failure as a verdict on their worth, a confirmation of their limitations, a reason to retreat or surrender. The person with an invincible mentality experiences failure as feedback, as data, as intelligence about what adjustments need to be made in strategy or execution. They do not take failure personally because they understand that failure is not personal. It is simply information disguised as disappointment. The third pillar supporting mental invincibility is the absolute mastery of your internal dialogue. The average person speaks to themselves approximately 60,000 times per day. Most of these conversations are unconscious, repetitive, and destructive. They rehash past mistakes, rehearse future failures, and reinforce current limitations. The person developing mental invincibility takes conscious control of this internal chatter. They become the editor of their own mental newspaper, the director of their own internal movie, the author of their own psychological narrative. This is not about positive thinking or affirmations, though these can be useful tools. This is about developing such precise awareness of your thought patterns that you can intervene at the moment a destructive thought pattern begins to form. It is about creating new neural pathways of empowering self-talk that gradually replace the old patterns of self-sabotage.
Your internal dialogue is the most powerful force in shaping your external reality. When you master it, you begin to master everything else. The fourth element of an invincible mentality is the development of emotional immunity. Just as your body can develop immunity to certain diseases, your mind can develop immunity to certain emotional disturbances. This does not mean becoming emotional, numb, or disconnected. The mentally invincible person feels fear but acts with courage. They experience disappointment but maintain hope. They encounter rejection but preserve self-worth. They face uncertainty but proceed with confidence. Their emotions become sources of information, and this emotional immunity is developed through deliberate exposure to controlled challenges, systematic desensitization to feared situations, and the progressive expansion of your comfort zone. Each day for 30 days, you must do something that requires courage, something that stretches your emotional range, something that builds your tolerance for psychological discomfort. The fifth foundation of mental invincibility is the cultivation of absolute personal responsibility. This goes far beyond simply acknowledging that you are responsible for your actions. This is about taking complete ownership of your results, your circumstances, your emotional state, and your future trajectory. The moment you fully embrace this level of responsibility, you simultaneously claim complete power over your life. When you stop blaming others, you stop giving them control over your outcomes. When you stop making excuses, you start making progress. When you stop playing the victim, you start playing to win. Personal responsibility is not a burden. It is liberation. It is the key that unlocks every door, the tool that solves every problem, the force that overcomes every obstacle. The person with an invincible mentality understands that they are not responsible for what happens to them, but they are completely responsible for what they do with what happens to them. This distinction is crucial. You cannot control all external events, but you can control your response to every external event. Your response is where your power lies. Your response is where your freedom resides. Your response is where your destiny is determined. The sixth component of mental invincibility is the development of unwavering focus. The human mind is naturally distractible, constantly pulled in multiple directions by various stimuli, thoughts, and impulses. The undisciplined mind is like a spotlight with a dying battery, casting weak light in many directions simultaneously. The invincible mind is like a laser beam, concentrating all its energy on a single point with devastating effectiveness. This level of focus is not achieved through willpower alone,
but through the systematic elimination of distractions and the deliberate cultivation of concentration. It requires creating environmental conditions that support sustained attention, developing mental habits that promote deep thinking, and practicing the art of single tasking in a multitasking world. The ability to focus completely on the task at hand, regardless of external distractions or internal mental noise, is perhaps the most valuable skill in the modern world. It is the difference between those who achieve extraordinary results and those who struggle with ordinary ones. The seventh pillar of an invincible mentality is the mastery of time perception. Most people are slaves to time, constantly feeling rushed, pressured, behind schedule, and overwhelmed by the pace of life. The mentally invincible person becomes the master of their relationship with time. They understand that time is not fixed but fluid, not objective but subjective, not something that happens to them but something they create through their level of presence and engagement. When you are fully present in the current moment, time expands. When you are mentally scattered across past regrets and future anxieties, time contracts. The person with an invincible mentality learns to slow down time through the intensity of their attention, to create more hours in their day through the quality of their focus, to achieve more in less time through the power of complete engagement. This is not time management, but time mastery. It is not about doing more things, but about doing the right things with complete presence and total commitment. The eighth element of mental invincibility is the development of supreme self-confidence. But this is not the fragile, ego-based confidence that crumbles at the first sign of challenge. This is not the boastful overconfidence that masks deep insecurity. This is unshakable confidence based on competence, preparation, and self-knowledge. It is the quiet assurance that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life presents.
This type of confidence is built through the accumulation of small victories, the systematic expansion of your capabilities, and the consistent follow-through on commitments made to yourself. Each time you do what you say you will do, your self-confidence grows. Each time you overcome a challenge you once thought impossible, your belief in your abilities expands. Each time you persist when others quit, your trust in your own resilience deepens. Supreme self-confidence is not something you are or are not born with. It is something you build through deliberate action, consistent effort, and accumulated evidence of your own capabilities. The ninth foundation stone of an invincible mentality is the ability to maintain perspective under pressure. When challenges intensify, most people's field of vision narrows. They become tunnel-visioned, focused only on the immediate problem, unable to see the broader context or long-term implications. The mentally invincible person maintains a wide-angle view even in the midst of crisis. They zoom out to see the bigger picture, zoom forward to see the ultimate outcome, and zoom within to access their deepest resources. This perspective-taking ability prevents panic, reduces anxiety, and enables clear thinking under pressure. It is developed through regular mental exercises that practice shifting between different viewpoints, different time horizons, and different levels of analysis. The person who can maintain perspective during turbulence possesses one of the most valuable mental skills possible in our rapidly changing world.
The 10th element of mental invincibility is the cultivation of adaptive intelligence. This goes beyond traditional intelligence or knowledge accumulation. This is the ability to think flexibly, adapt quickly to new circumstances, and find creative solutions to unexpected problems. The world is changing at an unprecedented pace, and the strategies that worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. The mentally invincible person does not cling to outdated methods or rigid thinking patterns. They remain intellectually flexible, emotionally agile, and strategically adaptable. They view change not as a threat, but as an opportunity to demonstrate their adaptability. They see uncertainty not as something to fear, but as a playground for creative problem solving. This adaptive intelligence is developed through deliberate exposure to novel situations, systematic challenging of your own assumptions, and continuous learning across diverse fields of knowledge. The 11th component of an invincible mentality is the ability to extract meaning from suffering. Life inevitably involves pain, loss, disappointment, and hardship. The typical person experiences suffering as purely negative, something to be avoided, minimized, or endured. The mentally invincible person has learned the alchemy of transforming suffering into strength, pain into purpose, wounds into wisdom. They do not seek out suffering, but when it arrives, they refuse to waste it. They mine it for insights, lessons, and growth opportunities. They understand that their greatest strengths often emerge from their deepest struggles, that their most valuable qualities are forged in the fires of adversity. This ability to find meaning in suffering is not natural or automatic. It is a skill that must be developed through conscious practice, philosophical reflection, and the deliberate reframing of difficult experiences. The person who masters this skill becomes virtually unbreakable because they have learned to transform every form of adversity into a form of advantage. The 12th pillar of mental invincibility is the development of unshakable values. Your values are your psychological anchor in the storm of life. When external circumstances become chaotic, when pressures mount from all directions, when others are compromising their principles for short-term gain, your values keep you steady, centered, and true to yourself. But values are only powerful if they are clearly defined, consciously chosen, and consistently lived. Most people operate with inherited values that were never consciously examined or deliberately adopted. The mentally invincible person takes the time to identify their core values, to understand why these values matter to them, and to align their daily actions with these fundamental principles. When your behavior is consistent with your deepest values, you experience integrity. When you experience integrity, you access a source of inner strength that cannot be shaken by external pressures or temporary setbacks.
Your values become your fortress, your sanctuary, your unshakable foundation in a shaking world. The 13th element of an invincible mentality is the mastery of energy management. Mental invincibility requires enormous amounts of mental energy. You cannot maintain peak psychological performance if you are constantly depleted, drained, or running on empty. The mentally invincible person becomes an expert in energy conservation, energy generation, and energy optimization. They understand that energy is their most precious resource, and they guard it zealously. They learn to identify energy drains and eliminate them ruthlessly. They discover energy sources and cultivate them systematically. They develop energy rituals that restore their mental batteries and optimize their psychological performance. This includes mastering sleep quality, nutritional choices, exercise habits, and recovery practices. It also includes managing social energy by spending time with people who energize rather than drain you, engaging in activities that restore rather than deplete you, and creating environments that support rather than undermine your mental strength. The 14th foundation of mental invincibility is the development of supreme patience combined with relentless urgency. This paradoxical combination allows you to maintain long-term perspective while taking immediate action, to remain calm about outcomes while being intense about effort, to be patient with results while being urgent about process. Most people operate at one extreme or the other.
They're either so focused on immediate results that they make poor long-term decisions, or they are so patient that they lack the urgency necessary to create momentum. The mentally invincible person has learned to balance these apparently contradictory qualities. They understand that meaningful results take time to develop, but they also know that every moment matters in the development process. They are patient enough to stick with difficult challenges for months or years, but urgent enough to make every day count in moving toward their objectives. This balanced approach prevents both the frustration that comes from unrealistic expectations and the complacency that comes from unlimited timelines. The 15th component of an invincible mentality is the ability to operate effectively under uncertainty. Certainty is an illusion. The future is unknowable. Change is the only constant. Most people find uncertainty uncomfortable and try to create false certainty through rigid planning, excessive control, or avoidance of ambiguous situations. The mentally invincible person has learned to thrive in uncertainty. They see ambiguity as opportunity, unknowns as adventures, and uncertainty as the natural condition of life. They do not need to know the outcome before they begin. They do not need guarantees before they commit. They do not need perfect information before they act. They have developed the psychological flexibility to adjust their course as new information becomes available, the emotional resilience to remain calm when the path is unclear, and the intellectual courage to move forward despite incomplete knowledge. This comfort with uncertainty becomes a massive competitive advantage because most people are paralyzed by ambiguity while you are energized by it. The 16th pillar of mental invincibility is the cultivation of relentless optimism.
But this is not naive optimism that ignores reality or unrealistic optimism that expects everything to work out perfectly. This is intelligent optimism based on the unshakable belief that you can find a way to make things work, regardless of how challenging they appear. It is optimism rooted in your confidence in your own problem-solving abilities, your faith in your capacity to adapt and overcome, and your conviction that every problem contains the seeds of its own solution. This relentless optimism does not deny the existence of problems, but refuses to accept the permanence of problems. It acknowledges setbacks, but maintains belief in eventual breakthroughs. It recognizes obstacles, but focuses on opportunities. This optimistic outlook becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because optimistic people see possibilities that pessimistic people miss, pursue opportunities that others overlook, and persist through challenges that cause others to quit. The 17th element of an invincible mentality is the development of supreme mental clarity. Mental fog is the enemy of effective action. Confusion is the enemy of progress. Uncertainty about what you want is the enemy of getting what you want. The mentally invincible person has achieved crystal clarity about their objectives, their values, their strengths, and their methods. They know exactly what they are trying to accomplish and why it matters to them. They understand precisely what they stand for and what they will not compromise. They are clear about their unique talents and how to leverage them most effectively. This clarity eliminates internal conflict, reduces decision-making time, and focuses all available energy on meaningful objectives. Clarity is achieved through deep self-reflection, honest self-assessment, and the courage to make difficult choices about priorities and trade-offs.
Then in the supreme mental clarity moves through life with the efficiency of a guided missile, while others wander aimlessly, like a ship without a compass. The 18th foundation of mental invincibility is the mastery of the art of strategic thinking. Most people are tactical thinkers focused on immediate problems and short-term solutions. The mentally invincible person has developed the ability to think strategically, to see several moves ahead, to understand the long-term implications of current decisions, to position themselves for future opportunities while managing present challenges. Strategic thinking involves understanding systems, recognizing patterns, anticipating consequences, and designing approaches that create multiple benefits simultaneously. It means thinking like a chess grandmaster who sees the entire board while planning their next move, rather than like a checkers player who only sees the immediate option. This strategic mindset is developed through studying successful strategies in various fields, practicing scenario planning and contingency thinking, and regularly stepping back from day-to-day activities to assess long-term patterns and trends. The strategic thinker gains tremendous advantages because they are preparing for tomorrow's opportunities, while others are still reacting to yesterday's problems. The 19th component of an invincible mentality is the development of absolute mental discipline. Discipline is not about rigid self-control or harsh self-punishment.
True discipline is about freedom, the freedom that comes from having your actions aligned with your intentions, your behavior consistent with your goals, your habits supporting your highest aspirations. The mentally invincible person has developed such complete mental discipline that they automatically do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, regardless of how they feel in the moment. They have transcended the tyranny of mood, the dictatorship of emotions, and the chaos of impulse. Their actions flow from their conscious decisions rather than their unconscious reactions. This level of discipline is achieved through the systematic strengthening of your willpower muscle, the gradual expansion of your capacity for delayed gratification, and the consistent practice of doing difficult things when you do not feel like doing them. Every act of discipline strengthens your mental muscle. Every victory over laziness builds your character. Every moment of choosing what is important over what is easy creates momentum toward invincibility. The 20th pillar of mental invincibility is the ability to maintain peak performance under extreme pressure. Pressure reveals character. Stress exposes weaknesses. Crisis separates the mentally tough from the mentally fragile. The mentally invincible person has learned to perform at their best when the stakes are highest, to think most clearly when chaos surrounds them, to access their greatest strengths when facing their biggest challenges. This pressure performance ability is not accidental, but is the result of systematic preparation. It comes from deliberately exposing yourself to controlled pressure situations, from practicing your skills under stress conditions, from developing rituals and techniques that help you access peak state regardless of external circumstances. There I got the way in any competitive environment. While others choke when the pressure mounts, you thrive when the heat is on. The 21st element of an invincible mentality is the development of supernatural persistence. This goes beyond ordinary persistence or stubborn determination. This is the ability to maintain forward momentum even when progress appears impossible, to keep moving when every rational indicator suggests you should quit, to find a way when there appears to be no way. Supernatural persistence is based on the unshakable conviction that breakthrough is always just one more attempt away, that success is always closer than it appears, that the darkest hour truly is just before the dawn. This level of persistence is not based on hope alone, but on the accumulated evidence that persistence pays off. That most people quit just before they would have succeeded. That extraordinary results require extraordinary commitment. The person with supernatural persistence understands that quitting is always permanent, while persistence always leaves the door open for eventual success. They know that their willingness to continue when others stop is their ultimate competitive advantage. The 22nd foundation of mental invincibility is the mastery of what I call psychological aikido, the ability to use the force of opposition to your advantage. Just as the martial artist uses an opponent's strength against them, the mentally invincible person learns to transform every form of resistance into a form of assistance. Criticism becomes fuel for improvement. Obstacles become opportunities for creative problem solving. Competition becomes motivation for higher performance.
Dejection becomes redirection toward better opportunities. This mental aikido is not about passive acceptance, but about active transformation. It requires seeing every challenge as containing within it the seeds of equivalent or greater benefit. It means asking not, why is this happening to me, but how can I use this to my advantage? This perspective transforms you from a victim of circumstances into a beneficiary of circumstances, from someone who suffers setbacks into someone who leverages setbacks. The 23rd component of an invincible mentality is the development of what I call emotional aikido, the ability to remain emotionally centered, regardless of the emotional turbulence around you. Other people's anger cannot make you angry unless you choose to be angry. Other people's fear cannot make you fearful unless you choose to be fearful. Other people's negativity cannot drain your energy unless you choose to let it drain your energy. The mentally invincible person has developed such strong emotional boundaries that they remain unaffected by the emotional storms of others. They can be compassionate without being contaminated, supportive without being depleted, helpful without being drained. This emotional immunity is developed through understanding that other people's emotions belong to them, that you are not responsible for managing other people's emotional states, and that maintaining your own emotional equilibrium is not selfish but essential. The 24th pillar of mental invincibility is the cultivation of supreme mental flexibility. Rigidity is the enemy of adaptation. Inflexibility is the enemy of survival. The mentally invincible person has developed the ability to change their mind when presented with new evidence, to adjust their strategy when circumstances change, to modify their approach when the current method is not working. This mental flexibility is not about lacking conviction, but about being more committed to results than to methods, more loyal to effectiveness than to consistency, more devoted to truth than to being right. The flexible mind can bend without breaking, adapt without compromising core values, change direction without losing momentum. In a rapidly changing world, mental flexibility becomes a survival skill and a competitive advantage. The 25th element of an invincible mentality is the development of transcendent motivation, motivation that goes beyond personal gain to include contribution to something larger than yourself. While selfish motivation can be powerful in the short term, it eventually becomes depleting and limiting. Transcendent motivation connects your personal success to the service of others, your individual growth to the betterment of humanity, your private victories to public benefit. When your motivation is transcendent, you tap into energy sources that are virtually unlimited. You access inspiration that sustains you through the longest challenges. You find meaning that makes every sacrifice worthwhile. This transcendent motivation is not about sacrificing your own interests, but about discovering how your own fulfillment can contribute to the fulfillment of others. The 26th foundation of mental invincibility is the mastery of intuitive decision-making. Logic and analysis are important tools, but they are not sufficient for navigating complex, ambiguous, rapidly changing situations. Mentally invincible person has learned to integrate analytical thinking with intuitive wisdom, rational evaluation with gut instinct, conscious deliberation with unconscious processing. They understand that their intuition is not mystical, but is actually their brain's ability to rapidly process vast amounts of information and pattern recognition below the threshold of conscious awareness. They have learned to trust their intuitive insights while also subjecting them to rational evaluation. This integration of logical, and intuitive decision-making gives them access to a fuller range of intelligence and enables them to make better decisions faster. The 27th component of an invincible mentality is the development of supreme presence, the ability to be completely here, completely now, completely engaged with whatever you are doing in this moment. Most people live in a state of continuous partial attention, always slightly distracted, never fully present, constantly thinking about something other than what they are currently experiencing. The mentally invincible person has mastered the art of complete presence. When they listen with their entire being. When they work with total concentration. When they rest completely. This supreme presence dramatically amplifies the effectiveness of every action, the quality of every relationship, and the satisfaction derived from every experience. Presence is power, and the person who can be completely present in each moment accesses a level of effectiveness that seems almost superhuman to those operating in a state of continuous distraction.
The 28th pillar of mental invincibility is the cultivation of what I call anticipatory resilience, the ability to prepare psychologically for challenges before they arise. Most people develop resilience reactively, building strength only after they have been tested by adversity. The mentally invincible person develops resilience proactively, building psychological resources before they are needed. They practice handling stress in controlled environments so they are prepared for stress in uncontrolled environments. They mentally rehearse dealing with various challenges so they are emotionally prepared when similar challenges arise in reality. They strengthen their psychological muscles before the test rather than during the test. This anticipatory approach to resilience building gives them enormous This anticipatory approach to resilience building gives them enormous advantages to the development of supreme self-awareness. You cannot master what you do not understand. You cannot change what you do not acknowledge. You cannot improve what you do not measure. The mentally invincible person has developed laser-sharp awareness of their own thoughts, emotions, reactions, patterns, strengths, weaknesses, triggers, and tendencies. They are like scientists studying their own psychology, constantly gathering data about their own mental processes, continuously refining their understanding of how their mind works. This self-awareness allows them to make micro-adjustments in real time, to catch destructive patterns before they gain momentum, to leverage their strengths more effectively, and to compensate for their weaknesses more intelligently. Supreme self-awareness is the foundation upon which all other mental skills are built.
The 30th and final foundation of an invincible mentality is the understanding that invincibility is not a destination, but a practice. It is not something you achieve once and then possess forever. It is something you must cultivate daily, maintain consistently, and deepen continuously. Mental invincibility is like physical fitness. It requires ongoing effort to maintain and regular challenges to strengthen. The moment you think you have achieved permanent invincibility is the moment you begin to lose it. The truly invincible person understands that invincibility is a way of life, a daily commitment, a continuous journey of growth and development. They approach each day as an opportunity to strengthen their mental fortress, each challenge as a chance to test their psychological defenses, each setback as an occasion to prove their resilience. Now you understand the 30 elements that combine to create an invincible mentality. But understanding is not enough. Knowledge without application is merely intellectual entertainment. The question is not whether you can understand these principles, but whether you will implement them. The question is not whether these ideas make sense to you, but whether you will make sense of them through practice. The question is not whether you believe in the possibility of developing an invincible mentality, but whether developing an invincible mentality, but whether you believe in it enough to invest 30 days in its development. The 30 days of systematic practice, deliberate development, and conscious implementation of these 30 principles. Not 30 years, not 30 months, but 30 days to lay the foundation of a mental fortress that will serve you for the rest of your life. The choice is yours. You can continue living with a vulnerable mentality, subject to the whims of circumstance, the opinions of others, and the chaos of uncontrolled thoughts and emotions. Or you can choose to spend the next 30 days building something extraordinary, a mind so strong, so resilient, so unshakable, that it becomes your greatest asset and your ultimate competitive advantage. The materials are available. The blueprint is clear. The only question remaining is whether you have the courage to begin construction today.